Welcome to Plato's Cave. I'm Jordan Myers, and I'm a master's student in philosophy at the University of Houston. You're listening to a reading group episode of the show, which means that in this episode, I discuss the paper Responsibility and the Limits of Evil, Variations on a Strawsonian Theme by Gary Watson, with two non-philosopher friends, Adam and Giffen, because philosophy shouldn't just be for philosophers. So, this is the fifth episode in the Free Will and Moral Responsibility series, and this is a wonderful paper by, as I said, Gary Watson. It was written in 1987, and this paper is an investigation into exactly what the title implies, the limits of evil, specifically from P.F. Strawson's view, which we discussed in the last episode. So I loved this paper. It's one of my favorites of all time in the responsibility debate, and this paper really gets us to question how we reactively or objectively view evil people or wrongdoers in our lives. And so that's exactly what we discuss. And I hope that you find it interesting as well. I know that I certainly did. So with that introduction, please enjoy this discussion of Gary Watson's work. So the paper that we're going over is called Responsibility and the Limits of Evil, Variations on a Strawsonian Theme. So just 30,000 foot view to see if I understand it correctly. I take Watson in this paper to be expressing, I think he says this explicitly, some sympathies with Strawson's, what he calls expressivist view of moral responsibility and the reactive attitudes. But he seems to be critiquing Strawson in a way that is, I think, similar, but perhaps different also from the way that we, and maybe specifically I, critiqued him at the end of last episode, right? Because I was making the assertion that Strawson is precluding the relevance of determinism, but then trotting out these exemptions that I thought smacked of clearly at least deterministic variables. And Watson seems, now I know Watson is a certain type of compatibilist, but he seems to, instead of critiquing Strawson in the way that I did, he seems to critique him in this sort of like moral community, moral address sense. Is that how you guys understand the general view of the paper as well?
Yeah, but I also think that he also critiques Strawson in a similar way that you did as well. I think like he introduces the concepts of like, just like environment and consequences and how those actually kind of they kind of are taken into account when we allow for what was it, the second plea of Strawson.
Yeah, that was at the very end, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's something that he also kind of introduces and kind of expounds upon as well. That don't we sort of inevitably do that?
I'm interested to get to that because I have some questions along the way. I don't know. I clearly agree with this in a large sense, but I want to kind of refine and figure out exactly how much and where I agree with this and where I might not.
Sure.
Okay, so he has some. I really like the introduction. Actually, I was joking around with Giffen a couple of days ago that like he explains Strawson better than Strawson explains Strawson, with like the freedom of resentment. I'll just read a few quotes from the introduction. He says, "This is how he starts the paper. Regarding people as responsible agents is evidently not just a matter of belief. So regarding them means something in practice. It is shown in an embrace or a thank you, in an act of reprisal or obscene gesture, in a feeling of resentment or sense of obligation, in an apology or demand for an apology. To regard people as responsible agents is to be ready to treat them in certain ways." Now, I love that kind of summary of the reactive attitudes, or at least that's kind of how they're brought in. So far, I agree with that because I would say like there's no objective or ultimate moral responsibility, but yes, we fall into these attributions towards people. He also has a nice summary of Strawson later down in the next paragraph. He says, Whereas traditional views have taken these attitudes to be secondary to seeing others as responsible, to be practical corollaries or emotional side effects of some independently comprehensible belief in responsibility, Strawson's radical claim is that these reactive attitudes are constitutive of moral responsibility. That's a great way of summarizing him, I think. And
Yeah,
he says,
this line
oh,
specifically, I was amazed at like
yeah.
Strawson, for God's sake, just say that.
It's a great way to summarize.
I fear
that.
Strawson himself would think it was over intellectualizing his work.
I might steal that and I might quote that sentence summarizing Strawson in my writing sample because that just puts it perfectly.
It really does.
I might say this is how Watson understands him, which I think is right. But he says he kind of lays out his aim in the paper. He says in the last paragraph of that column, here my aim is not to defend it, being the Strawsonian view, as superior to its alternatives, but to do something more preliminary. A comparative assessment is not possible without a better grasp of what Strawson's theory is. As Strawson presents it, the theory is incomplete in important respects. I agree with all of that, and that's what I said. I'm kind of interested in fleshing out with you guys. Now, in the next section, I found it interesting that Watson, I don't have the quote because it was kind of over several paragraphs, I think the first two. It seemed like Strawson was seeing the compatibilist as a consequentialist. And I was surprised by that because I don't think that compatibilists have a monopoly on consequentialism. Like you could be a Galen Strawson skeptic about responsibility and still endorse a consequentialist view of it. Like that's what I would say I fall into. You know what I mean? So I was surprised that he categorized he referred to compatibilists as consequentialists about it.
I think compatibilists in the sense of, those that, don't reject moral responsibility outright. Right? In the same way that Galen Strawson ultimately rejects moral responsibility outright. So it's
if you take let's go back to the Dirk Paraboom episode. If you're a reasons responsive compatibilist, that doesn't seem to me to hinge on the consequences of it. That seems to me to hinge on you've theoretically thought out that reasons responsive is the category under which moral responsibility follows, and it's not for the consequences of that. It's because it fits a certain type of action or type of person,
Yeah.
Because what I'm saying is it's not. I just don't think that compatibilists have a monopoly on consequentialism. And it seemed like.
Can you just expand on the example that would show that, Jordan? You said your view specifically. Maybe that's a little bit too early to say, but
well, I'll just use Galen's view. I shouldn't
expand on Galen's if you want.
I shouldn't project this onto Galen because I don't actually know what his ancillary views are on this. But
as an example, in theory,
I know for a fact that there are deep moral skeptics of a Galen Strawson sort that say, let's eschew any idea of moral responsibility in an ultimate sense, right? But what we can still say is, okay, well, that's garbage. But for consequentialist reasons, we can still preserve some aspects of moral responsibility, blame, punishment, because they have good consequences. And all I'm saying is that I thought that it was odd to refer to compatibilists as consequentialists as if they had a monopoly on it. No, okay. Maybe I was reading him.
I think that was a pretty good explanation, actually. I got that vibe. I didn't understand what your claim you were making earlier because it did seem kind of odd because, a lot of the tension here seems to be kind of under that false assumption. It's if we kind of get rid, maybe I misread it a little bit. You can clarify. But it was how do we address the fact that we have these kind of human interpersonal relationships that kind of structure the way, we treat people, in good or bad ways. How do we have that with like, but also to have like be skeptical of moral responsibility. And it's like I got the vibe like that they kind of tied it together like that. It's like once you get rid of moral responsibility, there's no like you kind of descend into like that weird dark space where everyone's in like the objective attitude.
It's possible that I'm either misreading Strawson's characterization of the debate, or it's that I misunderstood the characterization of the debate previously, and Watson is representing it accurately. But I just thought that it's very, in my mind at least, it's clear that there's not a compatibilist monopoly on consequential. I don't think too much of the paper hinges on that, but that was just a note that I had.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly like it wouldn't surprise me if neither Strawson, well, I mean, I would say Strawson in this case. I wouldn't be surprised if he just like really thought, like it was just the thing you're proposing where you have like this kind of,
yeah, Strawson for sure doesn't.
Yeah, I guess I can't say
about it. Yeah,
like Watson or Galen, but like I don't know. I mean, to them, I think just like maybe it's the time period or just kind of like the forces that they were able to like muster to imagine. Just they really saw as like, well, if you kind of take away this moral responsibility aspect, like there is no other reason. If you take away the ultimate moral responsibility, is there a reason to like preserve these like structures that we have? Because like they focus so much on it. I don't know. Maybe I'm like at the wrong angle here.
Because we got to remember though that like Strawson is a very specific type of compatibilist. Like he doesn't fall under the kind of quintessential. He's not a character-based account. He's not a reasons responsive account. He's not a moral reasons responsive account. And I always forget the fourth one. Adam, help me with that. It's
Oh wait, which one did you name there?
Second order.
I was thinking about something else, but
I'm sure that I can find it quicker than it would take me to rename it.
Second order.
Yeah, thank you. The one-to-one, the Frankfurt one. Oh, I'm sorry. I tuned you guys out.
You didn't say that, Giffen?
No, I did say that. Jordan was like, Adam says it, and Jordan's like, quite.
I just tuned you guys out.
No, I get it.
Don't hold reactive attitudes toward me, Giffen.
Of course not. Only the objective.
I beg you,
ever
the objective, yeah. But like, because Strawson is not P.F. Strawson is not one of those kind of the main types of compatibilists, right? He's flipping the relationship where it's not moral responsibility follows from these criteria. He's saying like our attitudes about it, our interpersonal attitudes about it, are what constitute moral responsibility. So he's like a really specific type of compatibilist, and I never took any of those four types of compatibilists as saying, we endorse this reasons responsive view for consequentialist reasons. They're just saying this is the moral responsibility that matters. Like it's here, and then
but like remember, like P.F. Strawson like starts his paper off like juxtaposing, like the debate between like compatibilists and libertarians, right? Where like they have like some debate where it ends with the compatibilists saying that just for reasons of consequence, do we, so like I think he's kind of hearkening back to that, right? Like that, the structure that P.F. Strawson sets up, like the kind of like imaginary debate between compatibilists and libertarians.
Then so maybe Watson is representing Strawson accurately, and I just really disagree with how Strawson is laying out that debate then, because I don't think it's between that. Like I don't know. It's
do you think so though? Because like I just wonder, like before you had read this paper, and we just may not have like a full understanding of like the true debate landscape. But I mean, before like papers like this came out, would you have been able to put forward as like a determinist, like any other proposition other than what Galen put forward? Do you know what I mean? Because Galen's saying like ultimately we have no moral responsibility, right? Would you like before a paper like this came out, were determinists even part of that debate? Like determinists would just say, well, ultimately we have no moral responsibility, until P.F. Strawson said that's not necessarily true depending on how you define moral responsibility. And in his case, like a reactive sense.
Yeah. I don't know. I actually don't know. Well, I know that P.F. Strawson's paper was written in the 60s. Galen's, the one that we read, I think, was like in the 90s. So it was, but I don't. I mean, I don't know really kind of the historicity of all these views.
But
Like,
Galen seems to be kind of like putting in his own words,
maybe.
like a point that he's been teaching for a long time, a viewpoint that likely was, I mean, it's not like a truly like insightful view that comes from determinism, right? Like we're not ultimately responsible. I'm sure like that is a very old view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Epicurean philosophy talks about that. Yeah, it's very old. Yeah.
There you go. So it's like I wonder if like the debate was possibly as rich before P.F. Strawson's paper, right? On like
maybe.
So I don't know.
It's just maybe I'm quibbling, but it really seems like that. And here maybe that was more accurately categorizing kind of the camps at the time, and it's not anymore. But it's just. I don't think that you can kind of call yourself an honest to God compatibilist, for lack of a better term, if you're hinging it on just the consequences. Because a moral skeptic,
I was thinking that too.
Because a moral skeptic could say the very same thing.
Yeah.
Like in order to be kind of, for lack of a better term, like a dyed-in-the-wool compatibilist, you have to be endorsing. And now I'm fine if we want to branch it at. The order of causality. Are you a Strawsonian, where it's the reactive attitudes constitute moral responsibility, or are you one of the four types or any variant of, where it's these theoretical grounds, if they're met, then moral responsibility follows from it?
Sure, but like it's weird that they wouldn't point to one of the four compatibilist arguments that indicate moral responsibility, would rather point to
you can't do. I don't find that valid. Yeah.
Which might have been like the position of a moral skeptic before someone like Strawson. Yeah. So it's like we don't really have any ultimate moral responsibility, but maybe you could kind of say, well, evolutionarily, we have empathy as a result. We're a social species, and it's it's pragmatic for us to adopt these kind of views of certain behavior, and
at that point you're almost just more of a Strawsonian at that point. Okay. I think I kind of get it more at this point, or at least I get my quibbling more at this point. That was actually just a side note.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
Okay. I maybe might be disappointed at the listeners. I don't think actually that much of the paper hinges on that distinction, but I just kind of wanted to make it relevant. Okay, but so I'll quote a couple more things. Second column, he says, in Strawson's view, there is no such independent notion of responsibility that explains the propriety of the reactive attitudes. It is not that we hold people responsible because they are responsible. Rather, our idea that we are responsible is to be understood by the practice, which itself is not a matter of holding some propositions to be true, but of expressing our concerns and demands about our treatment of one another. Again, a beautiful summary of Strawson. Really, I mean, we could have just, instead of reading Freedom and Resentment, we could have just read like the first couple paragraphs of this. So I'll skip the next part because I think we actually just brought it out. So in the next section, it's called Excusing and Exempting. I had a few questions about this. Well, first, I have a quote in the first paragraph. He says that Strawson is anxious to insist that these attitudes have no rationale, that they neither require nor permit a rational justification of some general sort. Nevertheless, Strawson has a good deal to say about the particular perceptions that elicit and inhibit them. Now, that's true, and I don't know about you guys, but I suspect that Strawson's kind of reneging of his claim to like over-intellectualizing these issues, I think he kind of regresses on that because I I do actually think that like the concern that I brought up is a legitimate one. It's like you can't just kind of say that we can ask questions and try to like systematize more rigorously these things. It's just you can't have that. Like clearly some cases strike us as just warranting certain reactive attitudes, and some cases just strike us as warranting the objective attitudes. But like I feel like the practice should be more scrupulous than that, and I feel like Strawson feels that too, and that's why he kind of backs away from it, like he hedges.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't even know where to go with this one because there's so much we can say. Kind of like we get into it further in the paper, because I think there's even a bigger critique than that. It's not just rational justification. It also boils down to how you ultimately view. What was on your?
Repeat. It's ultimately how you view.
It's ultimately how you view like the free will debate as well.
Yeah.
So whether you like kind of adopt determinism or libertarianism, and I think Watson does. If he doesn't say it directly, he at least points at some very interesting ideas. So
what I've heard, and I'm not familiar with the rest of Watson's work, is that Watson is a compatibilist of a certain type. I'm not sure exactly what type, but this is his most incompatibilist sounding paper from what I've read. So that might be interesting. Yeah.
But I think as we've kind of seen though at this point, like through like our readings, like to be a compatibilist is not really to endorse free will in the sense that anyone would, necessarily.
It's not contra causal free will. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll get into this at the end because I'm confused about to what degree he is a compatibilist or not. But Giffen, well, I think was it you or Adam who mentioned the two different types of pleas? I was going to let you guys introduce those. It was Adam.
Maybe it was Adam.
Yeah. So I already have the quotes actually. I won't force you guys to do it. So
I was going to say he focuses mostly on type 2. I forget type 1.
He does. What's type 1? Type 1 is simple, and these are different pleas that Strawson makes. The first type, I'm just quoting Watson here. He says, one type of plea is exemplified by the aforementioned reasons for inhibiting sentiments. This type of plea corresponds to a standardly acknowledging excusing conditions. So this is really pragmatic. This is like, you would never blame someone for being late if there was an accident that caused a traffic jam. Like they can't just move through the traffic jam. Like it's really pragmatic, and that's, and I think Watson was right not to spend a lot of time on that because that almost, for those, the libertarian, the compatibilist, and the moral skeptic may align on many of those, right? It's like libertarian, yeah, sure, you can have a contra-causal soul, but like unless you can levitate your car and just no one's gonna blame you for that. It's just like those are kind of, it is what it is. But then there's the second type of plea, and Watson says these correspond roughly to standard exempting conditions. They show that the agent temporarily or permanently, globally or locally, is approximately exempted from the basic demand in the first place. Strawson's examples are being psychotic, being a child, being under great strain, being hypnotized, being a sociopath, and being unfortunate in formative circumstances. Now, my retort is, how are these not deterministic? But we've already discussed that. And I think it seems like Watson moves towards agreeing with me towards the end of the paper. But we'll see. Well, rather, I agree with Watson at the end of the paper. But the next thing that I was going to move to was the next section called blaming and finding fault. And obviously, if I'm skimming over any questions you guys had, stop me. But he calls the Strawsonian view an expressive theory of responsibility, which I really like the name for that. And just to clarify it again, he says in a Strawsonian view, blaming is not merely a fault-finding appraisal, which could be made from a detached and austerely objective standpoint, but a range of responses to the agent on the basis of such appraisals. Again, a nice summary. But now he turns and he has this section called Some Critical Questions. Now, He says, I now turn to certain hard questions for the expressivist theory. It accounts nicely for excusing conditions, pleas of type 1. Yes. But exactly, or even roughly, what is its account of type 2 pleas? I think that this is the critical question. Like, I agree with Watson for sure. And he says a child can be malicious, a psychotic can be hostile, a sociopath indifferent, a person under great strain can be rude, a woman or man unfortunate in formative circumstances can be cruel. Evidently, reactive attitudes are sensitive not only to the quality of others' wills, but depend as well upon the background of beliefs about the objects of those attitudes. Now, this is where I had a question that I'm curious how you guys understood this. He says at the second to last paragraph of this section, he says, following Strawson's idea that type 2 pleas inhibit reactive attitudes by inhibiting the basic demand, I propose to construe the exempting conditions as indications of the constraints on intelligible moral demand, or put another way, of the constraints on moral address. Now, okay, clarify for me, have I missed, have we spelled out explicitly what the basic demand is? Have I missed that?
He definitely does in the paper here. So like the basic demand is that I think because he names a few different demands, right? Like he names like they need to be they need to hold some of the same moral values that you do. Like you need to be like playing in the same game in a sense, right? They have to be part of the moral community.
I thought, am I wrong? Was that much later in the paper? Isn't that more of like a Watson view than a Strawson view?
Yeah. Oh, so you're asking about Strawson?
Well, he says that like because he says following Strawson's idea that type 2 pleas inhibit reactive attitudes by inhibiting the basic demand, comma, I propose. Like, because I didn't think that Strawson in his paper used the phrase basic demand.
I recall Strawson like at least when like examining like the child or like the sociopath, they need to be sort of like they can't be so with like the child they need to be like morally fully
part of the moral community,
but almost like fully morally developed though, you know what I mean? Like you don't have to like so but and with like the like sociopath, they also need to be not only like morally like fully developed, but they also need to be part of like the moral community. And if they're not, given the fact they're a sociopath, they also don't meet the demand.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but it's not like there's like a well-defined like demand. It's just that there are specific demands that these individuals don't meet.
It was almost like it was one of those things where I could tell what violated the basic demand, but I couldn't tell what were the necessary and sufficient requirements for accepting it.
Yeah.
Like and it's totally possible that I've missed that somehow. Because what did Strawson say about the pleas of type 2? He says this. I'm quoting Watson summarizing Strawson. He says these correspond roughly to standard exempting conditions. They show that the agent temporarily or permanently, globally or locally, is approximately exempted from the basic demand in the first place. So like, so exempting conditions exempt you from the basic demand, but what is the basic demand? I don't. Here's a thing that I didn't have highlighted. Maybe this will elucidate it. His general characterization of pleas of type 2 is that they present the other either as acting uncharacteristically due to extraordinary circumstances, or as psychologically abnormal or morally undeveloped in such a way as to be incapacitated in some or all respects for, quote, ordinary adult interpersonal relationships. So is the basic demand that you're acting as yourself, you're not under extraordinary circumstances, you're psychologically normal, you're morally developed, you're, quote, an ordinary adult in an ordinary relationship. Is that kind of the basic demand?
I'm actually kind of viewing it differently because I'm thinking back to kind of like what was laying out before, and I think it's more of like what we demand from others, right? Because like that was definitely kind of phrased the way demand of others is there's like a basic demand we have of others' behavior, and then options to our demands.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. Okay, so I was viewing, so the basic demand is not a qualification. The basic demand is like what I would like the bare minimums of like what I require of you in an interpersonal relationship.
Yes.
Okay. That I want to read that again with my new understanding. Type 2 pleas inhibit reactive attitudes by inhibiting the basic demands. That actually makes more sense. Okay. So then he says, this is Watson, I propose to construe the exempting conditions as indications of the constraints on intelligible moral demand, or put another way, on the constraints of moral address. Okay, interesting. So interesting. So is Watson flipping the script here? So Strawson is saying like, Strawson says that when you take the objective attitude, it is constituted by your lack of basic demand. But then it seems like Watson is saying he proposes to construe the exempting conditions as when you're not open to intelligible moral demand or moral address. So is he then kind of shifting to something kind of similar to like a moral reasons responsive case? Of compatibilism?
I wouldn't go that far with it. Because I think he's really just restating what Strawson was arguing for. I think this is a restatement.
Okay. But under his kind of own, not lexicon, because he doesn't do that, but like his own way of viewing the debate. It's about intelligible moral demand.
Yes.
Okay.
It's so it's like we demand certain behavior from others, and there are exemptions to what we demand given.
Okay. It's not a causal connection, it's almost a corollary connection. It's like our basic demand is lifted on cases where there is no intelligible moral demand, but we're not like evaluating it as like there is no intelligible moral demand, therefore I lift the reactive attitudes. It's like,
yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
The seas are parting at the same time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree with that.
Okay. Honestly, I thought like the way he worded all this, I thought it was way better than Strawson. Like I understood everything that was going on.
Oh, there's a reason why I had my first question of that sort pages in, as opposed to I think it was the opening page. I had to clarify something of Strawson, because I didn't understand exactly what angle he was coming in at. But I think that makes much more sense. I think that's the right way to view him.
And I think like just as a quick aside here, it's like this is something that you want to study, right? Like exactly what points do we, exempt and kind of like our demands in a sense.
Yeah, it is. I like the way he views it, but I wonder if it captures all of the important cases. That's
We'll get into that because I think he brings up some really cool cases.
Yeah. Oh, he does. He definitely does. I also, just real quick, I also have not yet agreed to the flipping of the order there. That's something that I'm unconvinced about. I agree with Strawson that reactive attitudes are what constitute sort of interpersonal relationships, that they are you can't eschew them completely, right, in an interpersonal life. That would be total isolation, alienation from everyone else. And I agree that like his descriptive claims, sometimes we do apply the reactive attitudes and sometimes we do suspend them and take the objective attitude, right? I think, though, that when we do that or not, ethically speaking, has to be grounded by a more theoretical consideration that is open to deterministic causes. I don't think that you can just say that, like, when we take the reactive attitude and when we take the objective attitude, that is constituted by, if you're a Watsonian, the possibility of intelligible moral demand. Like it's not robust enough for me.
Yeah, but I think that's why Watson gets into the fact that your reactive attitude can then change when you're given more reasons.
Yeah.
So that, you're given a broader perspective at that point. Like, I think we should just get right into that case, actually.
I agree.
I
think
this will illustrate it. This for me did it for me. So.
Okay. But what I think we should too. But what I'm saying is that to me seems like exactly what I just said, where it's like the influx of deterministic information changes your reactive attitudes. And I think that I'm not making a descriptive claim about what we do. I'm making like a normative claim about what we should do. I just think that those should be, and obviously we can't comply like 100% with this, but like those should be grounded in kind of deeper ethical considerations of like, when is it actually ethically scrupulous to have the reactive attitude, and when like and I said there's different cases. There's permissibility and then there's like obligation. So
well, I guess my issue is like, I don't think you disagree with Watson.
Maybe I don't. Maybe I was understanding him differently then.
Yeah, because I don't think you disagree. So.
Well, okay, let's see. Maybe I don't. Maybe I accidentally read him in the parts where he was summarizing Strawson as those being endorsing of his views. But okay, anyway. I had a real quick question before we get into the zero. Wait, hold on. Mentions fully a lot. What is the connection with zero qualification? You know what? No, because he answers it. So I had in the next section, he says that children are gradually becoming responsible agents, but in virtue of what are they potentially and increasingly these things? A plausible partial answer to this question is moral understanding. But then he goes on and he repeats the same phrase twice. He says, they do not yet fully grasp the moral concepts in such a way that they can fully engage in moral communication. And he mentioned fully twice. Excuse me. And I had the question of what's a condition with zero qualification to the moral community under Watson's view. But I think he actually gives us a case with with the Robert Harris. Okay. I had one more question. I have one more note. What would Watson do with people who would be in the moral community and would be open to intelligible moral demand, but for them being in a situation that sort of precludes reactive attitudes generally? So
just to clarify, before we hop back into this here, mm-hmm. I think Watson does a lot of the time like express Strawson's point of view, but I think he's doing what you're trying to do. And he's trying to save Strawson's structure, but he's introducing a lot of like things that Strawson didn't actually explore fully enough. You know what I mean? Like the issues you have, I think, are the issues Watson has.
Yeah, maybe he does then. I don't know. We have to see it because like I said, this is the first time I read this paper. It wasn't the first time I read the others, so maybe I'm still fully understanding this. So I'll just repeat the question for Giffen. So my question is like understanding Watson, like what would he do with people who would be in the moral community or would be open to moral address, but for the fact that they are in a situation that kind of precludes reactive attitudes generally. So for instance, like I actually thought of this question when I was in a store. I was in like just Home Depot, and there was someone at the help desk, and I asked them like, hey, do you have this item? And they just showed me where it was. And it was like that person, let's assume, is open to moral address, right? But like we're sort of in a situation that reactive attitudes just don't really come up in a, like, we talked about like a cashier, I think the last episode. what does Watson do with those circumstances? Would he say that like the person is I don't know like how would he view that?
Well, I just like for clarification, did you, show any signs of like approval or any sort of gratitude, toward the person for leading you, or was it just like viewing them totally in the objective and like you are something to be managed in this case, you are to lead me to, or did you show some
That's a
something
dark view of like the objective attitude, but like
well, it would be to show any sign of, or have any real feeling of like, thank you. You know what I mean? Like even for you, like that feeling to emerge, like did that occur or did you view them?
well, I thanked like her obviously, but maybe
Nothing on the inside though.
well, no, it's like well, but to be fair, it's not like as deep as like thank you. But it's like
I mean,
like thanks.
Non-zero appreciation, I think, is kind of like the threshold here.
Yeah, maybe that was a bad example then. Like I don't know. I mean,
Because maybe I'm like wrong, but I kind of like you asked like what Watson would say about it, and I would like, we have to kind of just define like both like how you felt and how you behaved like during this encounter, because it's like those are the factors that are kind of important here.
That's fair.
He made it say like without the further information, like there's two agents who are members of the moral community, assumedly.
Let's assume that, yeah.
Yeah, not you, but like the other person. Right?
But what I'm saying is though is like I don't know, because it's like I'm thinking about a case where both parties would be in the moral community, but they're just in a situation where they both take the objective attitude towards each other, and it's not for negative reasons. It's not like you have to manage this person. It's just the situation doesn't constitute like the reactive attitudes being present. Like, you know what I mean?
I think a reactive attitude might be there, just very, very, very dull. The way you're framing it is almost as if like the objective stance is like the default way. It's like if you're doing something else, and I'm not sure that's necessarily the case.
Maybe. I actually totally agree with Giffen, and I think he would respond saying pretty much what Giffen said, that the degree to which you have a reactive attitude is in proportion to the act that you are engaging in, or
the relationship,
or the behavior, or the interpersonal behavior that someone is engaging you with. So it's like
he did an adequate job, and you kind of gave like adequate approval.
Yeah, so it wasn't like you were dealing with like an animal, or something to be dealt with. It was more of like there is just the tiniest hint of recognizing their humanity in a sense.
Yeah, because actually I thought of a good counterexample. Like imagine I don't know. Imagine almost as if you like went in there and just like typed into the kiosk where you wanted to go, right? Like that would be like there's a difference in like the behaviors in that case, right? You wouldn't thank the kiosk, and that maybe that's maybe that's useful.
Yeah, actually it is, because it's like it's clearly not. But I don't know if that's. So actually, that's a good kind of counterexample, Giffen. I don't know what to make of that, because I'm not really sure what Watson would say of another case where I might suspend the reactive attitudes, but not because I think this person doesn't have like a capacity for intelligible moral demand, but just because you can't do that in life all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like
maybe you're like super busy and stretched or something. It's like you need to get this item from Home Depot, and
imagine,
is that what you're kind of imagining?
But like, let me try to think of a better example. Like maybe
well, here's like another perspective on it.
Sure.
Maybe you are engaging in the reactive attitude, but there's just nothing to react to, right? So like
there's just no content.
Yeah, what I mean by that is like, what if like, someone was like bagging your groceries, right? Like you're not giving them a second thought, but then like you pick up a bag and they slap it at you. Like, you know what I mean? Like you haven't like, you don't like suddenly like switch from like, the objective to the reactive. It's more so that you had nothing to react to, and suddenly they gave you something to react to.
So you might even say you're in the reactive mindset, because that's the more default one when you're dealing with people, but nothing has either positively or negatively engaged that mindset yet
Yeah.
for any of the specific reactive attitudes to emerge.
Sure. So maybe that, you could be essentially at zero, but like your default is like you're going to react to someone, like, what someone does with you.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's like, maybe it's, it's part of, add like some sort of quantitative element to this, like, is it greater than zero? Is it zero? It doesn't really matter. But I think that's like the default mindset is that, if, you're going to react to things people do in,
Yeah. Well, so so let me ask another question then. How would Watson view, so let's say I get an email. Let's not use that because it's less personal. But like let's pretend I'm on like a Zoom call for work or something.
Let's pretend.
Right? Let's pretend, given that I'm on like a Zoom call for work or something, and like one coworker is kind of not understanding what I'm saying in a way that is extremely unhelpful to the forward progress of the call, right? And like, reactive attitudes of annoyance, frustration, blame, almost like, come up of like why can't you either get this or just postpone? Like we need to move on in the conversation. Like reactive attitudes come up, but I suspend them. Not because I view this person as unable to understand intelligible moral demands, but just because the intricacies of the situation kind of demand that it's just we don't have time to like get into that now. So like I suspend the objective attitude, or I suspend the reactive attitude, and just how can I manage this person to kind of move forward on the call?
Honestly, it sounds like you didn't suspend the reactive attitude in this case.
Well, no, but I'm saying I did. Like the reactive attitude emerges, and then I suspend it. I take the objective attitudes. You know what I mean?
I see.
I wonder if you're almost arguing then from consequences, like
Well, that's one example. Yeah.
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 I mean,
like what I'm asking is that case? Is that something that Watson would have a problem with? Does that fit into his scheme?
I think it does.
Okay.
I think you're just introducing new, exceptions to your own moral demand. Like you have a demand from
Basic demand,
the general populace, and like you're just introducing maybe an exception that wasn't brought up by Strawson, right? Like you just introducing a new.
Yeah.
So it's like whatever you'd call it, like incapable of whatever.
Or it'd be like ground. Yeah.
I'm actually thinking maybe we're still in the speculative kind of stage here. Maybe he would like kind of view you as being in the wrong in this case. It's like you are kind of behaving in a way that's kind of maybe other people would suspend their reactive attitude towards you if they thought like if the moral community thought you were behaving in such a way.
But that's okay. Like we don't. But like life doesn't give us. We can't just dive into our reactive attitudes all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like. Have you ever heard what are these like there's a bunch of dumb cliches about this. It's like sometimes you're arguing and it's like you're not actually going to agree, so you just kind of let it be or whatever.
Agree to disagree.
Yeah, like agree to disagree, and it's just it's like because like but the reactive attitudes like are still available. Like we could just get right back into this argument. You know what I mean? But you kind of have to just pragmatically move on.
What if the new exception you introduced is just if you find the person incapable of understanding your perspective? Like in the midst of a conversation, if you have concluded that you find the person incapable of understanding your perspective, you can suspend reactive attitude.
I don't know if that fits it.
Was that one of the demands? I feel like somewhere communication was mentioned.
The what?
I feel like somewhere communication was mentioned as kind of like one of the demands, like the capacity to communicate with the person. Am I crazy?
That could have come up.
I might be misremembering, frankly.
It might be a little too vague to encompass what Jordan's kind of bringing about here.
What I'm saying is perhaps that is barely on the fringe slotted into that case, right?
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're
it does seem at least in some sense a communication.
Yeah. Well, like to be clear, I maybe I'm accidentally coming out a little too harshly against this paper. I love this paper. I think his way of framing it is excellent. I just don't understand perhaps how he might incorporate or not some extra kind of exemptions that I would like to maintain from a viewpoint that may or may not be different than his. I don't know. I just, you know what I mean? I can't tell exactly how much the Venn diagrams overlap.
Let's get into his test case.
I agree. Go.
Because I think he does a good job of kind of bringing up a lot of the questions that you're having. So
yes. Okay. So why don't you just get into the Robert Harris case? Do you want to just? You don't have to I didn't have any quotes from it, but do you want to just kind of go over what he writes? Look, actually, do just the story of the heinousness of Robert Harris. Don't get into his backstory because I had questions of what Watson said after that.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm probably going to do a poor job paraphrasing this, but, Robert Harris was someone who, took pleasure in, the killing of two young men. And he not only took pleasure in it, but he seemed totally unperturbed by the action. And he had similar actions after he was sentenced to execution, to state execution, where he murdered other prisoners. He acted in psychotic ways just to he derived pleasure just from irritating other prisoners, or much of the way that he viewed the world was he desired to cause harm, and it never struck him that any of the harm he was causing was in any way reprehensible. So it never struck him that way. So in fact, he might have actually taken the opposite view, that what he was doing was in fact the best use of his time. So,
yeah.
because it kind of referred to the fact that his moral disposition was almost a rebellion against, the commonly held moral disposition on murder, on
Well, and did you mention that after he killed he stole a car from this young man, and he wanted to dress up as a police officer to tell his parents of the news so he could watch their reaction? Fuck. I mean, that's dark.
Yeah, so he's a true sadist through and through.
Now, so Watson says, on the face of it, Harris is an archetypal candidate for blame. We respond to his heartlessness and viciousness with moral outrage and loathing. How did you guys react, when you actually read the paper? This is weird. I actually felt horror at this person, but I don't know if I actually felt kind of outrage or blame. I feared him. I thought that this is not a person that I want to be reading that actually sent chills down my spine, and I was genuinely horrified of this type of person. But I don't know if I experienced the outrage of it.
I think that was less of the point, though, because I actually had the exact same thoughts. Because I think, given all the reading we've been doing has kind of primed us to view him in the objective sense. Yeah. So what I tried to do was I was like, okay, what if this had been my brother? What if he had slaughtered my brother and it had come to my house and had told my parents dressed up as a police officer, and that elicited a reaction.
I would want to kill that guy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like we're pretty detached just reading this story, and especially given the fact that we've been primed to view him in the objective sense. But if you make it a little more personal, then you can get on board.
That's
with,
fair. That's fair.
With Watson.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Now, he says, yet if reactive attitudes were implicitly invitations to dialogue, then Harris would be an inappropriate object of such attitudes. Now, this is where I understood, because I was some of my questions were in my notes. This is where I understood that Watson is very much not a character-based consequentialist or compatibilist. Sorry, because now I think this is actually a wonderfully tough case for character-based accounts, right? Because like he would endorse this, like this is who he is. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And so I think I understand this is Watson is explicitly not that sort of a compatibilist. He actually has. I'll read it because it's great writing. He says, however, not all communication is dialogue. Harris refuses dialogue, and this refusal is meant to make a point. It is in this effect a repudiation of the moral community. He thereby declares himself a moral outlaw. Unlike the small child, or in a different way, the psychopath, he exhibits an inversion of moral concern, not a lack of understanding. His ears are not deaf, but his heart is frozen. This characteristic, which makes him utterly unsuitable as a moral interlocutor, intensifies rather than inhibits the reactive attitudes. I still don't fully. I don't know. I just don't know what I think about. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say this is what I was thinking of whenever I was mentioning communication being kind of like a facet to view it earlier.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm honestly not a good example of like my own intuitions here because like they've been so primed, I guess, because like I mean we've been doing this series, but like I don't know, I've been interested in this since my senior year, so like maybe my intuitions are kind of betraying me here, but honestly like I just I don't know. Descriptively for me, it's almost like when someone it's almost like imagine kind of a scale of like immorality. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's like when someone kind of blips past neutral towards immoral. Yeah, my reactive attitudes are triggered. I'm a normal person in that sense, But I think, and maybe this is kind of, I don't want to jump the gun, but Watson almost kind of says that, like, at a certain point, well, at a certain point, maybe given certain conditions, our reactive attitudes are supposed to be diminished, right? But like, I wonder if my threshold for when I cut off the reactive attitude and go to the objective attitude is much lower than most people's because
on an immorality kind of scale specifically.
Yeah, specifically because I think that's obviously the one that we're talking about.
Yeah. Just clarifying.
Because here's the thing, though, it's because you're so detached from the case. I mean, like if the people that you cared most about were slaughtered, and then you were in court and the guy was cackling, like he was deriving like just absolute pleasure, and you were just like very upset. He kept turning back and just like he loved to see your pain. Like it was like I
would want to kill him with my bare hands.
Yeah, the reactive attitude. So in this case, you're reading about people from a while ago who you have met. Like I'm sure like this case had it been fresh, like I just feel like there have been cases like that, like in our time, like what was the woman's name who drowned her child in the car, and then she just drove her car into the water, and the kid like literally spent like last minutes alive, like drowning.
Yeah.
So, I mean, pretty bad person. Like it.
Mm-hmm.
The reactive response is, I think, the default when you hear stuff like that.
It is. Maybe, yeah. Maybe we'll move on. I just don't know fully what I think about this. Okay, talk about the roots of evil then.
Let's see.
So this is where kind of Watson pulls back the curtain a bit on Robert Harris's upbringing. So like I can't remember what it was, but like he goes into detail about like it was like it starts off fucking brutally. I mean, Robert Harris was like kicked in the stomach, like while he was still in his mother's womb. I mean, like his father, kicked his mother in the stomach, and like
At
that induced
6.5 months.
and that induced
pregnant.
labor. I mean, it was like Jesus Christ. And then, I mean, he was raised. He was like brutally beaten. I mean, it even talked about. I mean, there was this brutal part about how he would go to his mother for like for just to physically touch her, and she would smack him away. She would like break his nose with kicks. I mean, he was like bullied at school. I mean, it was like but like just harassed. I mean, he was like
The worst part is like to me was whenever they described him as being like super sweet early
he cried
on.
during Bambi. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the most crushing part to me.
And then he winds up in prison at age 14 for car theft. He was raped several times in the prison. Like he spent more than 4 years behind bars. He just like got into like fights all the time. He was just hardened and callous as like a human being. And I mean, Jesus Christ. I
They
mean, then
compare the prison system to like gladiator rings or something like that.
they were
Like, where
called
it
gladiator
teaches-
schools. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
teaches you how
it's
to
like,
fight.
dude, and then it gets really just dark and brutal. I mean, it's like it says he killed cats and dogs, laughing while torturing them. Like he stabbed a prize pig over 1,000 times. Like this dude was just, his mind was lost. Like he was like a shell of a human being at this point. And yeah, I don't know. It's like so you know, Watson says, it's like, I mean, you just read it, it's just like, Jesus Christ. Like, it's just like kind of a roller coaster when you're reading this paper. And, Watson says, no doubt this history gives pause to the reactive attitudes. Why does it do so? He says, no wonder Harris is as he is, we think. What is the relevance of this, though? Now, it's clear to me that, like, we just read an emotionally charged account of Harris's determination, like the deterministic factors, and, so Watson says to be homicidally hateful and callous in Harris's ways to lack moral concern. And to lack moral concern is to be incapacitated for moral community. However, to exempt Harris on these grounds is problematic, for then everyone who is evil in Harris's way will be exempt, independently of facts about their background. Now, this is where I know I disagree with Harris. Or Watson. So. That's an unfortunate mislip. I take it that this is that sentence that I just read is supposed to be a reductio ad absurdum for Watson. Like, but this is true for Harris, but this can't be true for everyone, because the reductio ad absurdum is then we would view everyone who is evil in this way as exempt, even if we don't know about this, any details of their background as we do.
Right.
But I actually view that as exactly the correct conclusion. Like that is actually right. Like,
I 100% agree.
Because what is true for sure is that no matter what the actual details are of this evil, it is true that, and I think Watson says this somewhere on later in the paper, if I were them, I would be them. Like if I had, I mean, he doesn't phrase it like that, but if I had, let's talk about this specifically. Maybe it's the next. I don't know where I have it. Here it is. So he says, A plea of this kind is, on the other hand, grist for incompatibilists' mill, for they will insist on an essential historical dimension to this concept of responsibility. Harris's history reveals him to be an inevitable product of his formative circumstances, and seeing him as a product is inconsistent with seeing him as a responsible agent. If his cruel attitudes and conduct are the inevitable results of his circumstances, then he is not responsible for them, unless he was responsible for those circumstances. It is this instance, however, an incompatibilist diagnosis seems doubtful. The force of the example does not depend on a belief in the inevitability of the upshot. Nothing in the story supports such a belief. The thought is not "it had to be," but again, no wonder. Oh, here it is. It's in the next section. The fact that Harris's cruelty is an intelligible response to his circumstances gives a foothold not only for sympathy, but for the thought that if I had been subjected to such circumstances, I might well have become as vile. Now, that is exactly why I disagree with his reductio ad absurdum, is because, he paints this, vivid, like it's excruciating to read example. And he, I think, rightly admits that, like, if I had been literally kicked out of the womb at 6.5 months and I was, just beaten brutally and like raped in prison and just, all the things we just discussed, if all the things had happened to me, I'd be fucked up too. You know what I mean? Like there's, and so that's true. I don't think anyone, maybe some sort of contra causal libertarian could object to that. Like your will can overcome those things.
They do in the end. That he gives that opinion.
I find that to be just I don't know what to do with that. That's just preposterous.
I mean, in some sense. Well, maybe Jordan can finish your thought.
Well, sorry, I was rambling, but just to make it concise, the details of that case is horrific. But if the details were different, but yet still, because all of the details will be either deterministic or random, the same sentiment is true, that if I had those specific details, I would have been different in a morally correct way. And those details are always true. So I kind of do view all evil people as just as not morally responsible as Robert Harris because of that fact. Right?
Yeah, I just it's like I think you're going in the right direction with this, but I've been thinking about it here, and it's like, well, isn't it in a sense easier to take the objective view once you can actually find reasons? And I think Watson kind of expounded on this, and we should be cautious of our ignorance to the causes. But ultimately the causes, once we know about them, then we're able to then apply like the objective view at that point. So it's easy to kind of view Harris's life and then apply the objective view. But say
you want to use Charles Whitman as an example? Is that where you're going?
No, I was just thinking of someone that grew up in the moral community.
Yeah, Charles Whitman. So, like, do you know the story of him?
Wasn't that the guy with the tumor, though?
Yeah. So he didn't have, like, unfortunate formative circumstances. He just randomly developed a tumor that was pressing on his amygdala and glioblastoma that he just initiated. Like, he even wrote, like, I don't feel like myself. Like, I think he either beat or killed his girlfriend and, like, mother or something, and then...
I think it was mother. I think he said in advance, like, I feel like I'm going to do something bad.
And he asked people to do an autopsy on his brain, and he went up to... This was at Texas A&M. He went up to the clock tower and shot some number of people. So that's not, the case that Watson trots out of bad circumstances. It is literally randomness. Like, it's not even deterministic causes.
But I think the example I was going for, though, because like the thing is, it's not about the unambiguous case, because you point to more of a case where we can actually point to something.
And
right?
go poor
Like,
him. Yeah.
yeah, like, okay, poor Harris
Hmm.
with
Yeah. Imagine.
poor Charles Whitman, or like with the tumor. But the point is someone who there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with their life.
Hmm.
Like maybe they grew up in like a very stable home with
Yeah,
loving
they do.
parents.
Yeah.
And there was actually a case. Let me see if I can remember all the details correctly. But there was that one girl who grew up in a very stable home. You guys might have seen this case. I'm trying to think where she was from. Might have been Vietnam, but it was in the United States.
Okay.
Where
I don't know.
she hired some assassins to come kill her parents because they disapproved of her relationship
Wow.
with like this kind of disreputable boyfriend, and she had dropped out of college.
Hmm.
And she didn't want her parents to know about that, so she decided,
Jesus.
I'll have them murdered. And and she, throughout the trial, she tried to play like the innocent girl and stuff like that. But clearly, she was, at some level,
Well, no.
so.
And I wasn't saying legally we shouldn't find her response. That's not what I was saying at
No,
all. Yeah. Okay.
the point, the question is
Yeah.
like, how easily do we view someone like that in the objective sense, especially if we're closer
Yes.
to the like the story itself. Like we're kind of viewing this passively, but how easily? I mean, say like I knew her personally,
Hmm.
right? And I knew her family, and I was just horrified by what
Yeah.
happened.
You have the strong reactive attitudes.
But then with her, we find out she has a tumor in her head, and
Or we find out she has a fucked up childhood. Yeah, like one of those things. Yeah.
Then I almost like instantly like kind of
Okay.
take the objective point of view. But the point is when it's ambiguous, and we have to just talk about it has to be genetics. It has to be genetics, or it wasn't the environment. It must have been genetics.
It's nature.
Sure.
Right.
Or some detail of nurture that's just unknown yet, right? Because that's the whole point. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Here's my issue. I think that this is perhaps a almost analogous. Remember we talked about this before. There's a conflation sometimes with fatalism versus determinism. Like you were kind of fated to do something versus you were determined to do it, right? Those are two different things. I think that is reemerging here. For Strawson's distinction, I don't think that I don't think that it's a robust standpoint to be kind of waiting on the footstep of the objective attitude for a detail to emerge, because there's not like because what we've done is like we've given clear examples, right? But we know for sure in any of, you mentioned the Vietnamese girl, whatever, did, it's weird to, this almost like, I don't mean to speak dualistically, but like whatever did cause her to do that is either just as determined or just as random as what caused Charles Whitman to do what he did or Robert Harris to do what he did. And it doesn't seem like we should kind of be teetering on the edge of the objective attitude for something that just strikes us as relevant to emerge. Do you know what I mean?
I know. I trust me. I totally understand you, but I almost feel like you're actually rejecting P.F. Strawson's model in its entirety. To be honest.
No, I don't think I am. I think I'm making a large acceptance.
I'll explain why I think you are.
Okay.
So the thing is, this is all about what we kind of, there is the basic demand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we demand certain behavior, and ultimately our reactions constitute the moral responsibility that we place on others.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that, you know what, actually we should lift those reactions entirely, because the thing is, for these people, because honestly, we don't know what caused their behavior. We also don't know. But there's no contra-causal free will. We
do know whatever it was determined.
Whatever it was.
Yeah.
Right. So we should actually suspend, our basic demand for all these people. We should.
If you'll recall, at the top of the conversation, I think I explicitly said that I disagree with Strawson about the causal order of his. Like, I don't think that it might be descriptively true at sort of like a very, well, for lack of a better term, like pre-philosophical level of us, right? Like myself included. Like the default with just people who I judge to be whatever we want to do, like Watson's kind of open to moral demand, right? Is the reactive attitude, because I have no reason to suspend it, right? At first. But I don't think that the grounding of all of this can be as simple as what Strawson puts forth. Like, I don't think moral responsibility is just constituted by reactive attitudes. Like, I think it, like, ethically speaking, ought to be grounded in something deeper. And like that's why I said I think that there is room for an expansive theory of what cases of the objective attitude are permissible, and what cases are obligatory. Now, with the caveat that I think in the permissible cases, you have to acknowledge you are trading off what constitutes interpersonal life for that exemption, like for the taking of the objective attitude. Like that, the permissibility is a kind of a plurality view. Like it could be different for different people in different relationships. The obligatory cases are cases in which I think you have a moral ought to do that, like where it doesn't, like you have to, right? That's because I don't think that you can accept Strawson's grounding and then also think that project that I just laid out is interesting, right? Like that's exactly what Strawson kind of rails against, the over-intellectualizing of it. So
I do entirely understand where you're coming from. I just wonder, like, how applicable this is, because it's like, so anything of like real, like any real grievances, like, say like I stopped by, your apartment and then just like literally just blew up your car, right?
Yeah.
Like
in theory,
you've got a basic demand for doing that. Like,
yeah, but that's a weird case, because it's like, we have obviously a long history, and at first I would have the reactive attitude and be like, what's going on? And like, but what I'm saying is that like I'm fully admitting that like there is a threshold, right, where like the reactive attitude can flip to the objective, and whether or not I did, like, to be honest though, I kind of would be pretty quick to take the objective attitude. Like why on earth would you do that? Do you know what I mean? It's like there's not, I can't imagine a reason that is.
Could though, like if I mean, like, all hypothetical, of course, but like say,
I've been laying this out for days.
I mean, like, just say like, I was a secret psychopath or something, like, and I showed up to your home and then murdered your family. You'd be like holy crap, like there was like a basic demand that I had that hasn't been met. Like it actually, in fact, wasn't just met, it was it's
violated. Yes.
Yeah, violated entirely. So it's like, in this case, like any feeling of anger or just like disgust, or just, I mean, disgust like a bad
those would like emerge at first. Like, I'm admitting to you that the reactive attitude is the default when it comes to interpersonal relationships. But what I'm saying is that I don't understand how to maintain those. It's almost, there's like this weird paradox. It's like the quintessential case where the reactive attitude should be strongest. This is almost, it's kind of an analogous thing to what Watson's doing. It's like, you just gave me an example of a paradigmatic case of where the reactive attitude ought to be strongest. Like, you of all people, you know what I mean, did this thing.
Sure.
But that's exactly why I don't think I could hang on to it for very long. Or maybe even, I don't know if I ought not to. I mean, I haven't, like, that's kind of, more work to be done. Because there's no account of you that I have access to that, like, would explain that behavior. Like, something would have had to go wrong. You know, like,
It
how
wasn't like him.
like, how could you be this person who I've known for 19 years, whatever it is, like, and do that thing? You know what I mean? Like, something would have had to have gone wrong.
It
So
it just seems like through your perspective of Strawson, that you're throwing out more. You're kind of like keeping what you want.
I am. Yeah.
Yeah, like so, like
I am.
like any kind of good reactive responses. Like maybe someone did something great for you. Like
Shoot.
you know,
Hey, you're frozen. You're frozen.
to do you bad. But it just imagine someone did
Hello? You're back now. You were frozen for a minute.
Unbelievable. But,
Strong reactive attitudes towards Skype. Yeah.
You're gonna have to adopt plea 1 here. But
yeah.
But
sorry,
no,
repeat that.
Yeah, it just seems like you
were talking about the asymmetry.
Yes.
I've kind of anticipated that response too. I think, first of all, that the asymmetry is a rather happy one. Like, I actually don't view it as all that bad.
Wait, can you clarify the asymmetry? I think I'm confused.
Oh, I'm sorry. I filled in. I knew what Adam was saying, but like while he was buffering.
I would like to hear him say it.
Yeah. From my perspective, the asymmetry is if someone did something as good for Jordan as compared to as what could be done as bad to Jordan, he would, the feeling of gratitude would remain, but the feeling of just kind of anger and response to, the bad deed would be he would then switch to the objective viewpoint.
Okay, so it is just like a prediction of that's how you would behave, or is this saying? Are you saying that's how it ought to be?
Well,
I'm saying that's his model.
Yeah. So Adam's saying, like, let's say I'm on the edge of getting into like a top like PhD program or something, and one of my letters of recommendation is an alumni from that school, and they reach out and they say, like, I want to put my reputation on, like, him, like, I believe in him, like, you will not regret it, and I vouch for him. I'd be like I just like welled up with like gratitude, with like, a good sense of obligation. Like, I want to prove this person right. You know what I mean? Like, strong, positive, reactive attitudes. You know what I mean? And Adam's juxtaposing that to he blows up my car, kills my family or something,
Right.
And
both.
Blows up the car with the family in it.
Sure. And Adam's trying to kind of point out this inconsistency, or this asymmetry between those two. I don't know if I see that asymmetry as bad, because what I'm saying is that the determinism leading to the objective attitude is always a live option, because we know that determinism plus randomness is true, right? Like, that's an axiomatic claim. So we know that whatever anyone does, it is due to either determinism or randomness or combination of the two. So that's always available for us to retreat back into. But the reason why, and I don't know if I've it's hard for me to kind of fully predict like how I would react in any given circumstance. You know what I mean? Like, we have to have Adam blow up my car and kill my family for me to know how I'd react. Know. But what I'm saying is that, like, that asymmetry is not necessarily an unhappy one, because, I agree with Strawson that these reactive attitudes are what constitutes interpersonal life. And insofar as, like, we can abandon some of the worst ones in us of certain magnitudes. Like, again, like, I'm not claiming that I never have negative feelings towards people, or that you should never have negative feelings towards people. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if you like betray my trust or something, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm going, but that's, I don't know. Like, I'm just almost saying that, like, at a certain threshold, I don't know. I don't have this fully mapped out yet.
No,
But
I totally get where you're coming from, and I know you are making a claim about what we ought to do
Mhm.
rather than what we do. But I guess my issue is that, it's like you're trying to kind of combine human experience and a completely rational approach, right?
Oh,
Because
sure, yeah.
because we already agreed, like in previous conversations, that a
Mm-hmm.
completely rational approach is to recognize that anything that someone does, good or bad,
No one's cause a sui.
sure.
Yeah.
So, but in this case, like, my issue with it is that it's you are pointing to what we ought to do, and you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. But it's
But can we
against,
do it?
it's against human nature. So
I just don't think
Is
it
that a
is,
problem?
though. But actually,
no, it's not a problem. It's not a problem to say that we ought to do that, but it's a problem in terms of like real practicing ways of viewing the world.
well, hold on. I have a quick question. Has Watson not shown us that we can do it in some extreme circumstances, right? Like, he has shown us that we can do it. All I'm saying is that, and I'm not making, like, I don't know, like, the descriptive parts of it, that's messier, right? But all I'm saying is that, like, if you make that leap, and I don't think it's a big one, from knowing the specific deterministic cause to knowing that there are specific deterministic causes in general, or random causes in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not, I don't see that leap as a very big one, because it's just all it hinges on is, like, whether I happen to be privy to certain, like, that just seems really incidental, whether or not I know about certain things.
It seems to be a big difference to me, and I haven't, obviously fully thought, this idea either. But I know, like, when we read Strawson's paper, he definitely actually disagreed with you at the very beginning, because he said that no one can operate on sort of like a vague philosophical, I'm sorry, scratch the word vague, but a philosophical thesis like determinism, right? Like, he did make that claim that can't directly influence,
How you
interpersonal
view people.
relationships. So you disagreed. You
Well,
disagreed.
I experientially know that it can. I'm not saying all the time. I'm not saying I walk around and, like,
That's correct. That's correct. I know that's true. But my point is like, I question whether you could, in an example of interpersonal relationships, if someone did something horrible to you, whether you could truly take the objective attitude on the knowledge that determinism is true.
I don't know. All I'm saying is that I haven't. I mean, I don't know, because I haven't been, like, just grievously wronged by someone like this. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. All I'm saying is that it is, and I do sometimes. And we are, like, I'm assuming you both do also. Like, you're not both just living. So, like, I don't know. I am taking what I like from Strawson and abandoning the rest, but I don't think it's in an unprincipled way. Like, I don't think it is in that way, because I'm admitting where he's right, but where I see a logical disconnect between.
It's in no way unprincipled, but I question whether it's feasible.
That's a fair question.
Like, I really do question whether it's feasible. Like, I actually, because I agreed when you kind of expounded on the asymmetry and said, well, you explained how it's in no way inconsistent, and I agree with that. But
I don't know if I agree with that, but maybe I should wait.
Yeah, but I really do question whether, and maybe this is just me personally,
Mm-hmm.
whether on the thesis of determinism, I could make that switch if someone, you know, grieved me so wrongly
Mm-hmm.
in an interpersonal relationship. Like it's not too hard with someone we don't know, but I think that's the less interesting case.
That's
That
harder, yeah.
yeah, it's like Strawson, like it's all about interpersonal relationships,
Mm-hmm.
moral responsibility we put on others in those relationships, and the reactions we have towards them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, can I say real quick, if I don't know. I take it that honestly your objection is a case by case basis, and it will be more true for some people than others. Um, I just don't know how much weight that objection holds. Like because it doesn't vitiate my any oughts I'm putting forth. Like you said that yourself, and it's not clear. Like I think this I don't even, this has to be true for all three of us. Like, haven't you actually changed the way you feel? This is almost like what it means to just like have a rational thought. Like, haven't you ever changed the way you feel as a result of just thinking something through? You know what I mean? Um, like, have you ever been on? I don't know. This is a dumb example, but like, it's kind of like you've been on an airplane and you're nervous, and then you actually just think through, like, do I actually have any reason to be nervous here? Like, there's no turbulence, there's no, and that actually can make you feel better. Do you know what I mean? Like, the chances of dying are so slim, like, and that actually makes you feel better. So you could say, because like I just don't know if I accept because never mind. Giffen, what's your question?
Well, I mean, I wanted to say two things. Like, I think I'm definitely leaning towards Jordan about the question of like, is it that large of a leap? As you brought up earlier. But the other thing that I like kind of interjected there while Adam was talking, apologies, was about like the asymmetry in the cases between like the grand good thing versus the grand evil thing.
Positive versus negative reactive attitudes.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry. I was
right,
making sure I understood you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I really don't know if I understood like your claims, but did you actually say like, it is equally fine? It is not inconsistent to, you know, suspend the, objective attitude in the case of like the extreme evil, but like, and it's fine. It's not inconsistent to then not do that for the great good, right? That's what you're claiming?
I mean, it's inconsistent in one obvious way that it is inconsistent between the two. But I don't think
with your belief.
I don't think it's deeply inconsistent to do that.
The point is about like the reasons for suspending the reactive attitude. So George, like, I will suspend the reactive attitude in these negative cases on the thesis of determinism, but I won't in because it actually is it's a positive.
There's no reason to do it. It's like
what if the cases? What if one of the cases is there, right? Just in the positive sense. Like I don't think
it's like someone has a brain tumor that causes them to help me.
Yeah, and it's like this is completely unlike them, and I'm kind of disturbed by this. Like,
but then
self-destructive generosity.
Then I'd be like, I'm really grateful that thing happened. I'm kind of just grateful to the universe, but I'm not really.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess my question was, it seemed like you would be willing to see like a instance where a case was available, like in both the positive and negative sense, but you were like willing, you would do it in one case and not the other.
No, it's not that I would not ever in the other. Like, because like if someone has a brain tumor that just it's a happy accident of the brain tumor versus an unhappy accident. Like, sure, like I don't know.
So the more knowledge you gain about the causes of it shatters the illusion.
Yes, but what I was saying is that's I don't think that's the gotcha that you thought it was.
No, it's not a gotcha, but I think actually Giffen's point was better than you thought it was, because I think it's actually a very, very good point that he brought up there, where they're definitely I don't know. I mean, it's
I'm not sure that it was.
No, you're kind of view it this way. It's like you're happy to be ignorant of the causes as long as it is beneficial and it induces positive reactive responses.
It's not necessarily ignorant. Well, I guess it's ignorant in one sense, but it's like, I mean, honestly, in a certain sense, sure, because those are what constitute, like, this is where I agree with Strawson, interpersonal relationships. Do you know what I mean? And all I'm saying is that now this is just, like I said, this is like a whole project of when it's permissible versus obligatory for what grounds, like, because you could have different views on different grounds, right? Like that's a whole thing. But what I was saying is that it is unambiguously true that kind of redress to determinism is always available in both the positive and the negative cases, right? But there are benefits and perhaps like deeper moral reasons to following those in the negative reasons than there are in the positive reasons.
Okay, so you're inclined towards there being an asymmetry there.
Yeah, because I think there's an asymmetry in the consequences for one thing, but other considerations as well, right?
Huh. I'm curious what you mean by the consequences in this case.
I mean, do you want to like? Sure. I mean, do you want to just be like just really just bitter and spiteful about this one time that someone fucked you over for years and just dwell on like how you want to get revenge on them and like maybe do it and fuck up your life because of that like spite? Or do you just want to like let it go and just take the objective attitude? Like this just, I don't know why they did it, but they did it. And I'm not going to view this person as like someone I need to kind of respond to anymore. Like I'm just going to move on. Like that's a very happy acceptance of the objective attitude in a negative case. But like someone does a great thing for you, like the professor vouches for me at like a school, whatever, right? It's like, sure, I could go into that, but like, what's the reason to,
I mean, the consequence is good for you specifically, not for like the system.
Well, actually, it kind of is good for the system. Like,
is it?
Sure. What about like negating revenge? Like that just.
I mean, what if like his behaviors were like irrational and putting faith in you? It's like, wow, this is very unlike.
Say that again.
Maybe like it was unlike him to do such a thing.
Unlike him to do. You mean is this the like, professor or the
professor?
The guy that fucks you over. Okay.
Yeah. So it was unlike the professor to do such a thing, and it was in a sense that like he should have gone with the better candidate. Like let's assume there was a better candidate, Jordan. I don't want to.
If there's gonna be a better candidate, yeah, to go for it.
So like Jesus Christ himself descends down and
you don't have to go that
he apply.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like it is like for the system's perspective in this case, and you can just substitute you for like me or anyone else in this case.
Okay, fine.
It might be better for like it's like well
because the more qualified applicant gets in.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. But that's
so
not that has nothing to do with the. I don't understand what that has to do with the like reactive attitudes then.
I mean, the case in both. Well, I guess the examples you gave weren't like parallel in that case.
That's just more of like that just kind of sours the positive reactive attitude when I realize like I kind of fucked someone else over. Do you know what I mean? Like by getting in over them, and then it's just that just muddies. I feel like that just muddies the positive reactive attitude in that.
I don't mind muddying the positive reactive attitude I'm feeling.
Well, no, I'm okay with that too. But I'm saying I don't think that was a counterpoint or a counterexample.
Okay. Can I like maybe reframe it? Maybe this will end up being not useful, but this is kind of what I'm considering. Both cases need to be as parallel as possible, just with only difference being positive and negative.
Sure,
so
go for it.
Two cases of like a close friend, a very, very, very close friend. Mm-hmm. Right.
Let's use Brian. Let's just use Brian to make it concrete.
Brian.
Yeah, he's not on the call. Yeah.
Right. So let's assume in the negative case, like Brian just acts in a way that is completely unlike himself. Like all the knowledge that you've gained about him is just completely violated. Every assumption just gone, and he does something horrific to you, like he invites you into like his home, and then he just like mutilates like your like limbs. Something horrible. right?
Okay, yeah, that's fun.
Well, I mean, the point is to use like
I was
two
gonna say
parallel
like
examples of high magnitude.
cheats. Like what if I had a girlfriend and he like
Okay.
has her cheat on me with him?
I guess we're shying away from the extreme examples, so that's fine.
Well, I just thought it was cleaner. Like I don't know. It's like the self mutilation. Like just kind.
Well, it wasn't self-mutilation. He mutilates you, just to be clear.
Sorry, from my
just
view,
to be clear,
myself is getting mutilated.
that is true.
Yeah.
So okay, I'll dial it back, and we can use me as an example if you prefer. But anyways, so he like completely violates your trust by cheating on like
cheating on me.
he cheats. Yeah, right. So he sleeps with your girlfriend, violating trust, and it's like a huge negative thing. But it is also incredibly unlike him. You have known him to be like preaching like the being faithful.
He's a Jonathan Edwards. Yeah, pretty sure. Yeah,
exactly. But then that's the counter example to that would be he does something like very, very consequentially good to you.
Mm-hmm.
That is also unlike him. Like he's like I took out my retirement benefits and gave it to you. It's like, you what?
But no. But here's the problem: is like I think that the positive one of that is really, really messy, but not for reasons that have to do with this debate. Because then it's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Like these are all kind of like very basic, like pragmatic questions about it. Do you know what I mean? And then when he's unable to answer those in a way that makes sense to me, then I'm like, what's wrong with him? Like, what is going on? Do you know what I mean? Because like, I don't know. I mean, do you get what I'm saying?
I like the limb chopping examples. So he chops off your limbs.
Yeah.
One example.
So that's the negative one, but what's the positive one? That's out of character?
Missing a limb, and he spends a lot of time designing a prosthetic for you.
Yeah, no, he literally sacrifices his entire life.
He undoes his But the weird thing is that, but I don't understand this example because the positive side of that is in his character. If he did do you know what I mean? Like if
I think that is the problem here. I think the idea is that it wouldn't be in his character. I mean,
we're not sacrificing all of his goals to make you a prosthetic arm.
But something would have gone terribly wrong. So you're not what you guys are arguing against is not that fact, right? Like something has gone terribly wrong, whether I know what it is specifically or not.
Meaning, like, it's so far out of his character.
Yeah.
It has to be like horribly out of his character. I mean, it could just.
Well, it's horribly because it's my limbs are gone.
No. What we're talking about, was your issue with the negative case?
No, but what I was saying is that I would view that as like I don't need to know what it is, but I know that something has like what the hell happened that he did this because it is so unlike who I know him to be.
Are you really going to reach that conclusion with no limbs, like in the hospital?
No. I didn't think we were discussing like the descriptive.
No,
I don't know. Like, what would I don't know. Like, but what I'm saying is that like, I was defending the happiness of the asymmetry there.
And I don't know if there was a happiness. That's what I was kind of trying to bring to light. But I may have done that in like an.
But what I'm saying though is like this is kind of the paradox of all of this is that the example of like Brian mutilating me is kind of paradoxical because it is like it's so we think it might be so triggering of the reactive attitudes because it is so out of his character, but that's precisely the reason to suspect or to search for what the hell happened, because it is like I wouldn't be surprised if he had always been that type of person, like if he was a Robert Harris. Do you know, are we surprised that Robert Harris did what he did? No. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess the problem was it was supposed to be a case that would give you, as equal reason to suspect something was wrong in both the positive and the negative sense. And I was trying to see if there would be a difference in your, or you think there ought to be a difference in your ability to kind of bring forth the objective attitude in those cases.
Yeah, I'm admitting to you that it's always there to be brought about because determinism plus randomness is always true.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and that's the next part is what I was asking you. Maybe it's just not developed fully. Like I don't know.
Maybe it's not, but I don't know. Maybe I just don't see it as that like odd to say that I don't do it in a like okay, let's work through it a little more systematically. Like
Sure.
if Brian does something that is both in his character and good, there's just no like that stuff happens all the time. You know what I mean? Like that's just that is what our friendship like is based on. You know what I mean? It's like, you know. So there's obviously no reason to like yeah, he did whatever he did because it's determinism plus randomness. That sure, but like I mean that's true. And it's also true that like our interpersonal relationship is constituted on my reactive attitudes there. So like it doesn't hit home as much, right? Like that's just descriptively. If he does something that is good for me but out of his character, deposits his your example gift deposits his 401k into my bank account, then I would be like, okay, what's going on here? Like can you give me some like reason, like like can you help me understand like why you're doing this or whatever? In the case that he has a reason that fits with his, this is a weird example, let's not get into why he would do it, but let's say he gives me a reason that like fits with who he is as a person or whatever, and like there are no like red flags that are raised, right? Then I just accept it. And if he can't do that, then I do begin to lapse into the objective attitude of like what's gone wrong. Like does he like what it, you know what I mean? I'm searching.
So the difference, if I can rephrase this, in the extreme examples we have here, like the case itself of like the bad thing happening is reason enough to kind of take this objective stance. It's like something is horribly wrong here.
Only if that is well, I guess it's weird. It kind of takes a different form in like two different cases. Like if Brian does something horribly wrong, like if Brian kills a teen and wants to dress up as a cop to show his mom, then I'd be like what the fuck? Like this is this is not who you are. Like this is not who you've been. So like that's almost begging for us to understand what caused the like, or this, it's almost begging for us to understand why we might take the objective attitude. Like, please, like, give us a brain tumor, give us like an aneurysm, give us a something, right? And in the case that he was always that sort of a scumbag, you know, like Watson says, well, no wonder. But the no wonder there is code for determinism plus randomness, at least from my perspective. Yeah. Right. And all I'm saying is that in the case where Brian, as I know him forever, he does this crazy thing and he like kills a teen and dresses up as a cop to tell his mom about it, right? Yeah. I am desperate to find a brain tumor or an aneurysm. But in the case that there isn't a brain tumor or an aneurysm, it's like, well, something went wrong, even if I don't know it. Because what I'm saying is that it doesn't seem like a sophisticated enough buttress to be just teetering on the edge of like, was there a brain tumor or not? Brain tumor, you fall into the objective attitude instantly. Not, it seems like for some people, you go back into the reactive attitude, but it's like,
I have no qualms. I have no qualms what you're saying in the negative sense. My question was specifically about like, does that kind of project automatically onto the positive sense? And I was trying to see the way you explained like how you would behave in these cases if it was different between like the extreme positive and the extreme negative. That was kind of like what I was digging into. I think you phrased it very well in like the negative.
Well, I was thinking it through like there too. Like I was just thinking it through to you.
Yeah, of course. I'm still thinking it through.
Because it seems like, because I mean, you know, I keep repeating it, but it's like it's just how I like begin the thought process on it. Like I do accept Strawson's view that those are what constitute interpersonal life, and it's true that especially like I don't know, like you know, if you guys, I'm just trying to think of just like a trivial example. I don't know, like
positive or negative.
Negative.
Well, I have a question here.
Yeah.
So from your kind of framing here, then, would you only take the reactive view for good behavior if it's within the person's character?
No, I also do for sure both descriptively, and I think it's probably an ought it's not wrong to go into the reactive attitude in negative senses too.
Oh, no. I'm only talking about the good. I might have phrased that.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So when you're viewing good behavior, right, are you only going to take the reactive attitude if it's within their character, if it aligns with who they, the character you've come to know?
I think perhaps, yeah, because when it's not, doesn't that sort of beg an explanation? Like if you did something inexplicably random, but it happened to be good, and I was like, "What, dude? Why'd you do that?" Because like it's cool that you did it, but like I can't understand why. It's not what I would expect you to do, and you can't explain to me why. Then it is like, what's? Do you get that intuition?
Yeah, I'm just wondering I'm just trying to think of like like real life examples here. Like if I showed up to your apartment, right? Like your Giffin's apartment, and I had an extra large Luciano's pizza, right? Like that's kind of like outside my character, but not so far outside the bounds.
Yeah,
Like,
but I could see you doing
it. Eyebrows, like this isn't.
I'd be like, all right, like. To be honest, I would want to know, why were you in the neighborhood? Like, why are you here? Like, I'm happy to see you.
No, I'm talking about if I was coming over anyway. Like if I was coming over anyway, but I decided to just roll by and pick up a giant Luciano's pizza, and like it's very surprising generosity on my part. It's not. It is. It is. I mean,
I'm just laughing at how you're doing yourself a little dirty.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. But there's like a spectrum of generosity that I'm capable of, based on how you guys know me. It is surprising.
3 standard deviations away is this behavior.
I just don't think that's that far outside the bounds. Like,
sure, it's not shocking.
Yeah,
it actually might be shocking, but it's not actually shocking. So
that's a good way to phrase it.
Yeah, but if I showed up. And
if you paid off my student loans for me,
sure,
then I'd be like, yeah, like what's going on? And you couldn't tell me why you did it or that a reason that made sense to me, then I would be like, I don't know what's going on right now. Like I
just felt like paying it forward.
I'd be like, what the fuck? You know what I mean?
So actually, even in the case where he does have an explanation that like is in his character, well, I don't know.
But he almost de facto makes sense of it in that case.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to expand this thought experiment. This is totally just like train of thought. But
hold on. I thought I came up with one.
Yeah.
Let's reverse it, Adam. I pay off because you actually have student loans still, right? Like this is a real life example. I pay them off. You're like, dude, what the fuck? Like you like, but it's like a happy what the fuck. You're like, what the hell? I'm like, dude, I won the lottery. Like I won $5 million. Like we've been great friends forever. I want to do this. That like it goes from what the fuck to actually that's in the realm of like if I won, dude, like if I did win a $50 million, like I would pay off both of your loans. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
So do you get what I'm saying? In the case that I provide a reason that does explain it, then it does nullify that what the fuck feeling.
Well, in that case though, it's like, it's then still within your character. You know what I mean? So I think we're still trying to probe like out of character.
Okay. I hadn't won the lottery and I had saved up my money for years, not paying off my own loans to pay yours off.
Or even just your grad school savings just dumped into Adam's student loans.
But then Adam, I think you should be like, what the fuck? Like something has gone wrong in a right way for you, but something has gone wrong. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So I certainly buy that framing. I mean, it's got to be within the reasonable bounds of the person's character. I mean, it can't be.
That's just not like. That's not like. I can't. It's just I don't know why I would ever do that. Like just forego my own. And it's not because it's not like I owed you money or like fucked you over monetarily somehow. Like those would be reasons. I don't know. Do you guys get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. We're really just trying to probe like
Yeah.
this because I mean there is an asymmetry going on here to an
Yes.
extent,
Yes.
and I don't think you had made that clear until we brought up like
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So
Well, I'm
So,
liking this too because it's making me think it through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one final example that I thought of.
Yes.
So this is the case. So right now, where we're thinking with like Harris, is his name Harris? Am I?
It is.
I'm
No, it's
sure-
Harris.
Yeah. Okay.
Robert.
For some reason, I immediately. Well, anyway.
Yeah.
Anyways. So right now, I think, am I correct in saying we all kind of view like Harris in kind of the objective sense? Like
Yeah.
his after hearing like the
Mhm.
well, the whole story
The
and
details of this.
even if before the story, because we've been primed, maybe we already started taking like the objective sense a little bit.
Sure.
Jordan, would you be willing? So it's basically we can say like, oh, of course he did that. Like, oh, like
No one.
it makes sense. Yeah, no wonder,
Mhm.
right? In such a way that like just because his behavior was just like, so kind of consistent towards this, would you be willing to take the objective stance in a sense, like in a situation where like Adam just shows just such immense generosity that kind of is in his character, but that is good towards you?
What? I missed that. What was that?
So this is a case like directly the opposite, where the only thing that's changed is like whether it's like was a good or bad thing, right? So
I feel
Adam
like
does this thing
question
that
has already been asked.
yeah, I guess I want to hear.
Well, you said, would you be willing to take the objective attitude?
Oh, well,
it's not.
Okay, you're right.
But
It is.
I don't get the willing part because it's like I thought I
Take away the
explained
willing.
this,
Would you like? Would you think you ought to?
but I thought I had clarified this with Adam's probing questions. Like if I had reason, like, but I actually don't understand. How have I not answered this with like all of the probing Adam said? If it was a scenario in which his actions made no sense, then I would be grasping for the brain tumor, whatever it was. Like, and in the case where I don't get it, I've already defended why I don't think that's a sharp distinction, right? But in the case, like, I don't know. Have I not answered that? Like, Adam, is there a question there that I am like not understanding? I thought that I had. We had gone over that with like the lottery, the saving up for the loans, the.
Sure. I think like your structure seems to boil down to whether good or bad, for you to maintain the reactive attitude, it's got to be within the person's character.
I don't think so for the negative. That's the asymmetry.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think.
Yes.
I wanted Jordan to say like you ought to,
or
in
at
the
least for
negative
the
case.
heinously negative,
right,
and
extreme negative and positive.
And Giffen, that may be, depending on the details, a permissibility, not an obligatory case.
But in the negative sense, you think it is obligatory.
No, I'm saying it depends on the, like, I don't know. This, we got to know the details. Like, I just don't know. Like, it could be, I'm sure that, like, in some cases, it could be a permissibility case. Like, that's just, I don't know. That almost depends more on the person. Like, that's kind of a pluralistic view.
So,
like,
I'm sorry. Can you clarify again what your criteria is then for the negative case?
The negative case is, I think this is tough. When someone does a negative reactive attitude, or someone does something negative that inhibits or brings about the reactive attitudes. Sorry, we're going on the 2-hour mark, so I'm getting a little choppy. I think that it is for sure permissible, morally permissible for you to take the objective attitude. Whether or not it's obligatory, I think depends on the details of the situation. So, for instance, when there's like, this might be, we talked about this before, the legal case, for instance. Even if someone has wronged you, even if someone has wronged a family member, it would not be permissible. It would be obligatory for you to tell the truth in a hearing about it or something. Even though in order to do that, you may have to stifle your reactive attitudes towards that person. I think that is an obligatory case. Something softer, something like a permissibility case would be...
Well, can I ask a clarifying question about the obligatory case? Would you say that any sort of negative action on someone's part outside of their character necessitates taking the objective attitude.
That's an interesting one. That depends on. That's a great question. Out of someone's character, I'm tempted to say yes. I don't know what I think fully about that because it's like the out of character for that person. I feel like morally it ought to trigger some investigation, right? And I guess that investigation necessarily takes the objective view. It is it's I think as Watson says, it's asking how, that person like came to do that. Because yeah, I wonder almost if that I don't know about that. What do you think about like my initial leanings?
I think it makes sense.
Yeah,
I think it makes sense because I understand like the whole obligatory versus permissible. Like I totally understand your distinction there. I'm just saying like 'cause I know Strawson to an extent kind of
he thinks that project like this is wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Because he kind of like introduces that in his original paper, right? Where it's like that is part of the the 2 hour mark, the second.
I know.
Right, the second plea. Like if it and the thing is he points, but the issue is I know that he has a limited scope on it. Like I know that he doesn't because he points to things like stress. Or lack of sleep, and you go further with that. I understand that, but I'm just saying like.
But I think he's inconsistent in that even the cases he trots out. I think he's being inconsistent there. Like I don't think that you can say that the reactive attitudes are what is constitutive of moral responsibility, and we cannot critique that practice as a whole. I don't think you can say that and then also trot out these exemplary or exempting cases. Like, is that not to do the very thing Strawson said we could not do? Like, because I view those as that's determinism. Like, if someone has schizophrenia, they were determined to have it. Like, they can't just contra causally will the schizophrenia out of them, right? So, like, I think Strawson doesn't want to call that a deterministic detail, and that's how he avoids the inconsistency. But I think that is blatantly a deterministic detail about that person, and I think that's where the inconsistency comes in.
I understand where you're coming from here, but like, okay, let me try to think this through here.
Yeah.
So in his model, taking the determinism out of it here, he's saying that, you can suspend the basic demand if there is an exempting case. And he lists a few, including, being a child, being a sociopath, but also not being yourself at the time.
Yeah, so it was he wasn't himself, I think was his phrase.
Sure. So I guess I'm not seeing the difference there on like the negative side in a sense, because the thing is like, you take it further in the sense that, well, given just someone we know nothing about, if this is, if I'm not in some sort of interpersonal relationship with them, we can recognize that determinism plus randomness ultimately brought about their behavior, and we can take the objective view on that. And I can also do that if, someone that I do have an interpersonal relationship with, if they somehow act outside of their, how their character would indicate they would act. In that case, then I will also take the objective viewpoint. But I don't think Strawson necessarily disagrees on that point.
No, he doesn't. But I'm saying that the
I know what you're saying.
Okay, yeah.
Just making an interesting point there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought I was clarifying
the framework that he puts in place for
Yes.
how we should view whether we should take the the reactive attitude on the.
But actually, I don't think he says should. I think he just says do or does. I don't think he says the should. Because that's the very thing he's kind of railing against almost. Like he correct me if I'm wrong, but he trots out cases in which the objective attitude is available to us. But he's almost like he doesn't want to get into the odds, which is weird.
I do kind of agree with that, Jordan.
Can I push you a little further on that? I'm so sorry, Giffen. I think it's an interesting question, may not be, but so I guess I'm a little lost at this point, maybe because we're 2 hours in, because I understand that if someone does a bad action in their character, we do take the reactive attitude, but why should we? Why under your model should we take, the reactive attitude towards bad behavior in someone's character?
I think the should for me in that case is a little soft. Honestly, the shoulds for me more come out in the negative sense. When you should not take the reactive attitude in the negative senses. That's where the kind of the shoulds come out. And you asked about when it was in their character. And that for me is more of just that comes down to the kind of pragmatic consequentialist aspects of the relationship, right? Like here's
fall back to consequences in that case.
I do because let's say that like you and I are like we don't even have to say, like you and I have argued about things in the past or something. You know what I mean? It's like if it's like we really just don't agree, I can just kind of keep pushing it and just keep pushing it, right? Until like we either just agree or like it just like blows up or whatever. Or it's just like I can take kind of the objective attitude and be like, I don't know, like I see it this way, he sees it this way. I don't understand why he sees it this way, but we can't just keep like arguing like, you know what I mean?
Well, I'm thinking more like in behavior, like say
well, that is kind of behavior based. Like I wouldn't argue about it anymore with you.
Yeah, no, but you're switching over to the objective though. I'm talking about when you should. When should we take? Because I think you kind of like changed it halfway.
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. I'll chalk that up to the. I'll go for a plea 2 type thing.
Of course. But I'll just throw like a concrete example. Like so it's in my character to occasionally be a dick, right? So so say like I was at your guys' apartment, right? You were charging your phone, say, right? And like so and my phone was on 1%. And actually, not even 1%. Say my phone was on 50%, right?
Let's make you an ultra dick.
Your phone was nearing,
2%, and I was expecting a call.
Yeah, so
about a sick mother.
But I'm like, man, this is like the only outlet around here. So I pull out your phone out of it and plug mine in.
Yes.
I mean,
I understand the question perfectly at this point.
Well, let me ask the last question here.
Yes.
Is the only basis for moral responsibility at that point in kind of modulating my behavior?
No.
Okay.
It is for maintaining the interpersonal relationship that we have, the reactive attitudes generally. Like I don't like that I don't and actually Adam, if it was a reactive attitude, it wouldn't be for consequentialist reasons, because that would be to take the objective attitude. That would be to mold you as a thing, not as a person, right? So if it were only for that reason, it would be in the objective attitude camp. If I wanted to just kind of like, this is someone who I have to modify so that I don't have to deal with this in the future, that's objective. I think you should, especially in interpersonal, perhaps maybe only exclusively in interpersonal cases, maintain the reactive attitude, because that is, you can't only have it one way, basically. Like that is like what constitutes our interpersonal relationship. If every time, like, if just like anything, even a minor inconvenience, not an inconvenience, but a minor wrong happened, and I just like weirdly took the objective attitude, that would deflate part of our interpersonal relationship. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I buy that. I buy everything you said. Yeah.
Okay. I'm so glad you asked that question because you're right. It was my midnight brain combined with the 2.5 hour mark that kept reversing it on you, and your question is vitally crucial.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So now I understand the should now.
Yes.
So okay.
I'm so glad that you kept beating me like down to answer that question because I'm so happy to answer that, and I wasn't dodging. That was just like my brain reversing the question.
Do you have issues with where we've arrived at? Because I'm
You just
pretty
restate
happy.
it briefly.
What would you say there?
I just want like Jordan to like restate like where we
I
landed.
want to try restating Jordan's
Let's
argument.
do it. Let's do it.
Adam,
yes.
restate Jordan's argument.
Okay, so you should adopt the reactive attitude when the reactive attitude is integral to maintaining the interpersonal relationship.
I would only add, I would change the wording from you should adopt to you should fail to suspend because that admits that it's the default in an interpersonal relationship.
Okay.
True. Good point.
Yep.
Okay. So maybe I'm crazy, but it sounds like Jordan, like you seem to value the interpersonal relationship in all cases. I didn't finish.
I know. That was funny.
You seem to value
How
it.
queer you value
It's like
No.
I'm sorry. I was just
I'm like, so it seems like this. I don't know. Are you always willing to like say you should fail to suspend to save any interpersonal relationship?
No.
What about toxic ones?
Oh, for sure not. But that's when the things that I would like to flesh out in a like a dissertation.
Mhm.
These many pragmatic or consequentialist reasons come out, right? So in the case that Adam does be a dick and he unplugs my phone charger, he does for his, and he is just fighting me on this. Like he just will not admit that was the wrong thing to do. Like he just will not. At a certain point, I begin to be confronted with the option of just running this into the ground, right? Like this is like, we are no longer going to be friends because he unplugged my phone charger, right? Or I can take the objective attitude and be like, I don't understand it, but I am just going to suspend my reactive attitudes of blame, of resentment, for the greater good of like the friendship or whatever. Whatever, right? Let me give you another example that you might be kind of.
And also, while you're thinking of that, I think something to kind of circle back around to is something we touched on maybe like an hour or so ago, where there seems to be you can adopt, like the objective attitude, and I mean this is kind of a simplistic way of viewing this, but whenever there's a failure in communication or understanding. So like if Jordan then views me as a person who is, incapable of understanding why he's mad, he might then suspend, the reactive, like once he truly concludes that like I'm incapable.
At least at this time. Yeah.
Exactly. Then you might then take the objective attitude at that point.
Exactly.
And who knows how many of those experiences, can survive an interpersonal relationship.
Exactly.
So
because we know that it cannot be always. If that's always my view of Adam, then we no longer have a relationship. But likewise, this is my argument, insisting upon the ubiquitous assertion or application of the reactive attitudes is absolutely going to just vitiate the relationship also, right? So then it comes down to how often and when we do. And what I'm saying is that I don't think Strawson has the tools to have like the scrupulous view of when we ought to and when we ought not to. And that's why I buy part of his, but I don't buy his reactive attitudes are constitutive of moral responsibility, because I think that leaves you that's all you can say. I don't know what you can do after that. And this is where I thought Watson demurred from Strawson in a way that I don't know if he made as explicit as I would like, where he did admit that determinism plays a role.
Totally, that's what I thought too.
Yeah, and that is just blatantly contra Strawson.
Because he kind of like, I know I've already used the word juxtaposed wrongly, but I'll use it this time right. He juxtaposes like the two, positions, determinant versus kind of like a libertarian viewpoint. And if you actually view the life of Harris, you actually arrive at two different conclusions depending on which, frame you're viewing it from. Like if you view it from determinism, you say, well, ultimately, we shouldn't adopt the, reactive attitude toward a character like Harris. But if you're a libertarian, you might still believe that Harris could have overcome, his background or who he is. You know what I mean? Such that you might still have reason to maintain the reactive viewpoint. I definitely don't think you have solid ground to adopt the objective in that point.
Like, and to add on to that, what tools does Strawson have in his view to say that you should? Like, he doesn't have any of those tools. He just says that, like, you know what I mean? Like, he just says, like, sometimes we do in the circumstances of unfortunate upbringing or of he wasn't himself. But what if I say, like fuck you, Strawson. Like, no, I hate Harris. Like, I hate him, and I want to, like, blame and resent and punish him for what he did. What is Strawson to say at that point? Like,
I think kind of going back to what Strawson was saying, like, I think he would talk about the moral community at that point, and then talk about, Harris's ability to kind of respond meaningfully to your expression, right? So, at that point, he's an incapable figure of doing that. Therefore, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to let you finish your thought. But I love that you said that, because I agree that Strawson may say that, but I can't find the quote at this point. Earlier in the night I might have found it, but then Strawson is explicitly going back on what he said about this practice. I'll butcher the quote. I'll try to get it verbatim. Neither permits of nor allows rational justification. Is that not to explicitly violate that thing that Strawson said?
Can you repeat that quote again? I'm not sure I understood it.
Strawson, I want to find it.
Yeah, what's the context for that one?
The practice of blame, the practice of reactive attitudes, Strawson says, neither permits of nor allows an external rational justification. I know that's damn near the quote. I can't find it. I know that is damn near the quote. I quoted in my like senior paper, I think. I'm gonna be so mad if I can't find this. This is brutal. This is terrible listening too, but just bear with us. I don't want to ask you to just take it on faith, but I know that. Do I not have it highlighted? I know it's damn near. I mean, it's gonna be damn near that verbatim.
And I think it's also really important to recognize that, like, let me read this quote by Strawson. It's in the section "Evil in the Limits of Moral Community," where Watson is quoting Strawson. Yep. I'll read from Watson first. He writes that the reactive attitudes essentially involve regarding the other as a morally responsible agent, as a term of moral relationships, as a member of the moral community. So I think in this case, like, it's really important to view Strawson's work through interpersonal relationships. It has less to do with, some figure we're reading about. It's more about, the moral relationships you have with others. Yes,
for sure. But what I was saying is, and I have the reactive attitude towards myself right now for not being able to find this quote, but I think I might be able to find it faster in my writing sample, honestly. What I was saying was, um, uh, damn it. But I thought Watson was making the point that even if this did happen to like, just use a close friend of yours, right? Like if Brian was the guy that uh, Harris killed, right? At first, we would have these these upswells of reactive attitudes, but Watson, I thought, was saying that when you learn, even if it does hit home for you, like even if it is affecting your interpersonal relationships, of his background, you kind of just go, well, no wonder. Like, geez, like I feel sorry for him. Like, this is an abused and malfunctioning human being. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think he says like they're occupying a state of both kind of like being a victim and like having exempted themselves from being a victim, or either being a victim and like the perpetrator.
Yeah, victimizer versus victim. They're both. So
I have it. I have the quote.
Okay, let's hear it.
The act of holding responsible on Strawson's account, quote, neither calls for nor permits an external rational justification. Strawson, page 64. But the 64 doesn't correlate. I gave us the janky PDF. I apologize. The real PDF is different. So I'm saying that what Adam said Strawson might say, I 1,000% agree with, but then he is at odds with his own like project there. Do you know what I mean? That's what I'm just taking this. I vehemently disagree with the neither calls for nor permits an external rational justification. Then it's like, then we're just done. Like, whenever you do have the reactive attitude, whenever you do take the objective, it's just like, okay, he doesn't have any power to his thesis.
Yeah, it's almost just kind of like just defining moral responsibility as like, like, oh, well, you're treating them as morally responsible when you have a attitude that suggests
the reactive attitudes are constitutive of moral responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, just try to phrase it a little differently, but it is kind of like it ends there, right? It's like, oh, so in the case where like I have a reactive attitude towards someone, like, it almost is like what more is there to say at that point?
For lack of self-aggrandizement, can I read what I say in my writing sample? I just say, I find this version of Strawson to be a rather dull and uninformative one. It merely states that saying someone is free, holding them responsible, and having reactive attitude towards him are all part of the same response. It is a sort of reflective equilibrium that does not arrive at a convictive conclusion. I contend it lacks philosophical rigor and explanatory power, as well as informative power. It merely describes some of our actions and avoids engaging with the messiest parts. On this view, we have nowhere to stand when asking ourselves or others if an attitude is in fact appropriate.
I guess I'm just a little confused by that quote though, because if we recall, like Strawson does, go into like say someone wronged you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to learn, that they were under high stress or hadn't had a lot of sleep, I mean, he puts out those examples himself, and that is rationale. That is further information entering our minds such that we conclude differently. So I guess the quote doesn't seem to align with like much of the paper for me. Oh no.
Well, I think he tries to make it align because I don't think. Well, I know he explicitly is not putting forth a framework of oughts, whether they express themselves in terms of permissibility or obligatories, right? Like, I think that's how he gets out of it. But I'm saying is like, dude, that's not enough. Like that's just, there's so much more. And it's not me wanting more. I think there's like a moral more there,
Yeah, I think he explicitly like states, I mean, maybe I'm misremembering, but doesn't Strawson state that like you could bring up the fact that different moral communities might exist, and that kind of muddies it? Like he kind of like almost like sees like the potential muddiness, and he's like, I'm going to put that to the side so I don't have to talk about this. Because even though like thinking about it just for a little bit kind of does bring us to the point where all he's saying is like, if a community holds it, like reactive attitudes towards this thing, then that thing is, something that you ought to like be morally responsible for. But that might be different for other communities. Like there's no ought.
There doesn't seem to be. He brings forth these examples of the plea 1 or plea 2 as these are cases in which you find yourself, or you might find yourself, taking the objective attitude. I think that's it. I think that's all he's doing. And all I'm saying is, like, I don't want to go, like, you might. Like, when should you? It's like, yeah.
Or just, like, imagine, like, another community that might not in one of those specific instances,
Yeah, it's
right?
like,
it's like,
are we
if they
just to
didn't
say both of these are cool? Like, is this just, like, we just done? Like, is this all kosher?
Imagine him just kind of, like, zooming way out of, like, different communities throughout history. It's like, wow, they do suspend it in these cases, and they don't in this cases. Weird. That's how they define moral responsibility. And then going to like another group, it's like
it begins
the
to
same
become
thing.
like a project of an anthropologist, not a philosopher.
It is an anthropology project. It sounds.
And here's okay. I'm gonna bring it full circle here. Where I thought maybe I don't disagree with Watson as much as I thought I did, but I think if that's true, then I think Watson disagrees with Strawson more than he lets on, because. Okay, so because Watson seems to me to be saying the criteria is intelligible moral demand.
Yes.
And that seems to, I think, 2 hours ago, I might have said that I thought that was inverting Strawson's project. Because it seems to me like Watson belongs on the list in the blog post about Dirk Paraboom as the 5th type of compatibilism. Instead of reasons responsive, it's intelligible moral demand. Unless I am misunderstanding him.
No,
it's totally possible.
I don't disagree. I would just say that, like, the compatibilism that both Watson and Strawson argue for, it's so soft. It's like a very soft. Actually, less strong.
It depends. It depends on Watson.
I said Strawson. Watson.
Oh, okay.
I said Strawson. I think Watson, the compatibilism he does argue for is very soft, because I think he does bring up, just like. Sorry.
No. It's great. It's great. I think it's soft or it's not, depending on is because this is what I might still not be sure on. Is Watson saying that he's saying almost everything Strawson is, but that the reactive attitudes can be viewed through the lens of intelligible moral demand, or is he saying that if this person with whom we're thinking about or engaging with is meets the criteria of having the capacity to understand intelligible moral demand, to be part of the moral community, then they are ripe for moral responsibility. Then they are ripe for reactive attitudes. But if they're not, then they ought not be. That's not that soft of a view, but then he is very much disagreeing with Strawson.
I think it's the latter.
I would like it to be the latter. That's a view I find actually very interesting. And I think that intelligible moral demand is a great way to view, like, or is perhaps one of several good ways to view some of the considerations in that larger project that I've been, like, talking about, that I want to, like, to do the thesis on. I mentioned I emailed him before to, like, come on the podcast, but I'm going to email him again with that specific question, because that's one that I really want to know. And I don't know, here's the thing. If I read this paper again, which I will, I don't know whether or not I'll have a confident answer on that.
Because, like, for me, like, at least when I was reading this, it just seemed like, I think we've actually arrived at a better place than Strawson or Watson, honestly. Like, I think.
I think so, but that's just because I think it.
Well, it's actually more your system that we kind of, like, brought about, a little more clarity to. But yeah, I think it it definitely makes sense in the sense that you're kind of combining kind of Galen's view a little bit too. You're throwing a little sprinkle of Galen. Actually, kind of a heaping of Galen.
It's a heaping of Galen.
Serving just like the few tidbits of PF that were, that are valuable to the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think that it's funny. I have notes on kind of how I'm viewing like the whole thing at this point. I think at this point, it's sort of like I feel as though I fully succumb to Galen's argument, because you have to, theoretically at least, right? Like you just have to. And I fully succumb to certain parts of P.F. Strawson's argument, namely that reactive attitudes are what constitute interpersonal life. And then I very Jesus Christ, I'm buffering at this point, but like I very thoughtfully pull the parts of Strawson that I like, namely his language of reactive and objective attitudes. I think that using that language is a non-trivially good way of viewing this debate too. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't think that that's just cool flowery language. Like I think that deepens understanding.
And I also think Watson's kind of language of intelligible moral demands is actually just a, it's incomplete, as we've kind of, as you demonstrated, because I've come to agree that ultimately there's no difference between, the background of Harris and, possibly the unknown causes of someone else.
Mm-hmm. It's not a strong divide. Yeah,
but it, intelligible moral demands is very interesting, as long as you throw in other caveats, such as like you have an intelligible moral demand of someone's good behavior, and if it's outside of that, then it's an unintelligible good behavior, and you have to view it in the objective lens at that point. So I think
it's a character-based Watsonian compatibilism account.
It's pretty interesting.
I think it is, and I will say actually, I think this Watson paper is even more valuable to me, because I think he pointed out what I find is almost the converse of what he's pointing out. I think that in my further project of bins of exempting, it is morally impermissible to take the objective attitude, is when the person does not have the capacity for intelligible moral demand. Like that is a scenario where you ought not do it. This person is, a psychopath, an invalid, something like that. Like this person does not have the capacity to do that. And so you bringing that kind of standpoint to the conversation or to the relationship is not warranted. Like it's inappropriate.
You mean like the reactive attitudes are inappropriate?
Yeah, in the case where the person, does not have the capacity for intelligible moral demand. And I did not. And I would not have included that in my impermissibility bin before reading this paper. So I think that he actually did. It's not just the language. I think he added a case for me. This might have great paper, really great episode. I would love to be able to ask Watson about that though, whether he does that or not. This is probably like I said last time it was like one of my favorite episodes. This is like one of my favorite episodes as well. I like this a lot. I'm legitimately going to re-listen with kind of like a notepad, which is going to be like a fucking art. When we're closing out on the 3-hour mark, so let's just end it. But I really enjoyed this episode. If you're somehow listening at this point, like you must really like this debate too at this point, listeners. So if you are listening, thank you for doing so, and tune in next time.